there are easy ways around it, right? So when we're talking about sleep, I think a lot of us don't realize that our electrical environment impacts us, our light environment impacts us, and our noise environment impacts us, right? We're living in a busy city. The noise is loud. The street lamp is coming through, and we're charging our phone by our head, right?
Welcome back to another episode of the Peak Performance Life podcast. Today, I am very excited to have Dr. Catherine Clinton on the line. She is a quantum biology health educator. You are going to learn what that means, and it's so important. I'm so excited to get into it. Dr. Catherine is a licensed naturopathic physician. She spent over 16 years helping people overcome their health issues. She herself was diagnosed with 2 autoimmune conditions and Lyme disease while in medical school. She began the long and difficult journey of healing, a path that led to the commitment to help others to not only heal physically, but to return to the relationships we evolved over millennia with a deeper sense of health and belonging. By healing herself and patients like her, she discovered that true health comes from our relationships. Dr. Catherine has learned how our quantum biological system is intimately and inseparably connected to the world around us. Our relationship with the dirt beneath our feet, the sun, the wind, the water, the plants, the seasons, each of that is the real medicine, and her mission is to empower as many people as she can with this knowledge to encourage the paradigm shift we so desperately need. So Dr. Catherine, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited to talk with you more today.
Yes, me too. So I would love to start with maybe just a definition. People may be wondering, what exactly is quantum biology and how did you get interested in it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So quantum biology is a new emerging field, and it looks at the subatomic action in the body. It's studying quantum effects in the body. And really what that means is it's looking at the flow of electrons, protons, photons of light, phonons from sound, and how that impacts our body. It seems that there is a sea of quantum action that gives rise to what we see on our lab reports or in our symptoms in a doctor's office. It gives rise to that chemical mechanical model that we learned in school and still dominates healthcare settings across the globe. And so it's really exciting because it gives us another option. It doesn't negate the chemical world because we know that happens. But we have trillions and trillions of cells in our body, and each one of those cells is completing hundreds of thousands of tasks each second. Now that is mathematically impossible under the current model of a chemical only model or a random collision model where we have keys floating around trying to find their receptor, randomly bumping into the contents of a cell or a biological space. And when they finally find their receptor, they unlock and biological action happens. But that's impossible in the scale we're talking about, right? Trillions of cells. Some scientists estimate it at 1 million tasks per second in each of these cells. So again, just not feasible under the current model. And that's where quantum biology comes in. It doesn't negate this chemical model. It says, first, what's happening is something at the subatomic level, on the quantum level, giving rise to what we see around us. And you asked how I got interested in it. I was in naturopathic medical school, and I was in my sort of initiation year, really long hours, really long clinic hours, and I got sick. I was diagnosed with 2 autoimmune conditions, ulcerative colitis, which affects the GI tract, and Hashimoto thyroiditis, which affects the thyroid gland. And I was also diagnosed with Lyme disease. So it was like I was in the perfect space to get sick because I had all this medicine at my fingertips. I was right down the hill from an allopathic traditional medical training school and across the river from an acupuncture school. So I could sort of piece after a year or so, piece the physical pieces back together and get back to that productive member of society level, which was amazing to go from debilitated to active again. But as so many of us know with a chronic disease, that's not the picture of health, right? There's so much more to living a vital, thriving life. And that's when I got interested in quantum biology. It was actually a physician, my physician, and the one I was doing clinical rotations underneath. She said, you should look at psychoneuroimmunology. And she kept pushing and kept pushing. And that's just a big fancy word for how our emotions impact our biology. And they have a huge impact, right? They impact our cytokines, chemical messengers, our inflammatory state, our immune system. So many things are impacted by our emotional state. And it was during this time that I was doing research on mitochondria, and I found an article from Martin Picard, talking about how our emotions impact our mitochondrial function. And it was absolutely fascinating to see that there's this energetic state happening. And at the same time, there's research coming out from UC Berkeley, from Greg Engel and Graham Fleming, showing that quantum effects were in play in photosynthetic bacteria. They were looking at how a photon gets captured and then to the photosynthetic reaction center. And they found that, well, it's not this random meandering, right? Just like the cells I was telling you about. It's not this random key and lock. Those particles are using quantum phenomenon to get there at almost 100% efficiency. And they're also using quantum coherence. So the whole cell is vibrating. Those proteins in that cell are vibrating to keep that photon on its fastest path. And that's what just blew me away. I was like, oh my goodness, there's this invisible blueprint, so to speak, happening in biology. And I was hooked. And I haven't stopped studying and researching it since.
That is amazing. It's so fascinating and interesting to me. I certainly do want to try to break it down into more practical terms for the practical listeners as well, because there was a lot of big words there that maybe people didn't understand, but I find it fascinating for sure. But yeah, to your point though, it is very interesting. There's no question that if you said, hey, take one person who's happy and has a positive attitude and puts his feet in the grass every day and gets sunlight and gets good, those people compared to someone who might be angry and resentful, and you say, well, these people, let's just say they even slept the same and ate the same and exercised the same, who's more likely to get sick or get a disease? And I think we all intuitively know that answer. And so it's interesting. So let's see, how can we break this down for people with more practical advice? And I guess my first question is, many people might be thinking, well, how do you even measure this kind of stuff? How do I know if something is making an impact or changing? So maybe we could talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And one of the parameters that is so often used when looking at health and symptom onset or disease onset is inflammation, right? It's really the foundational piece that kind of guides the biology in whether it's going to be healthy and thriving or whether it's going to start degenerating and having symptoms and disease states. And so when we're talking about inflammation in quantum biology, all of those big words and fancy terms, we could just replace with electrical charge in the body. So we have an electrical charge. Every cell in our body, even our organelles like our mitochondria are in charge of making ATP. And that is the energy currency of the body. And Douglas Wallace has done amazing research showing that dips in ATP, in that energy currency, in the mitochondrial production of ATP, are associated with almost every disease state out there. So it is foundational, and it helps to create that electrical charge in the body. So maintaining that electrical charge in our body is so foundational for health. And breaking that down, we can look at how relationships we've walked away from with modern life have really taken us away from the relationships that help us replenish that electrical charge in the body, whether that's grounding and earthing and putting our feet on the ground and being exposed to that sea of electrons that lines the earth and lines things that are in the earth, right? Putting our hands on a tree, gardening, all of these things help us to maintain that electrical charge in the body, that negative electrical charge in the body, which is associated with an anti-inflammatory state. A positive electrical charge, or an overproduction of a positive electrical charge in the body, is associated with inflammation. It's associated with these symptoms and disease onset. So we can really look at it like that, and how so many of the things that we evolved with over millennia, right? The natural earth beneath our feet, being tied to the seasonal change, being tied to the rising and the setting of the sun. These are actually foundational pieces of our health and wellness. And we've really kind of relegated them to inconsequential sort of, oh, by the way, reminders. But really, they are the backbone of our health. And the more we can tend to that, the more we can tend to that charge, tend to those relationships, the healthier we become.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, to your point, we know that people who work night shifts have all sorts of higher rates of, getting sickness and diseases and things like that, morbidity rates, right? And you would say, well, right? If you looked at it logically, you might say, well, what's the difference, right? If they sleep 8 hours, they might sleep 8 hours, right? But it's a different time of the day. It's not in the rhythm, like you said. I like to personally wake up with the sun, as soon as I get a little bit of sun come through, which I try to block it as much as I can. But once that sun's up, I want to be up, and so, yeah. So how can people, so you mentioned a couple of things like grounding and earthing. What happens, intuitively, I know I feel better when I do grounding and earthing. I know I feel better when I get a little bit of morning sunlight. I feel better when I'm, in nature. And there's all sorts of, there's tons of studies and all things about that, about people just going out into nature and healing themselves, right? But what is it about, even if we start with earthing or grounding, what is it about that makes it, like, how does it affect your charge, or what's happening there?
Absolutely. So when we come in contact with the earth, and there's many ways to do that, right? We can be barefoot, we can touch a tree, we can garden, we can wear clothes and shoes that are conductive and don't stop the flow of those electrons, cotton, silk, wool, natural fibers, those synthetic fibers, rubber and polyester, those kind of materials act as an insulator. So they block that conduction. And what's happening with our body is the same thing that happens with an electrical socket in our house, right? I always say that the earth is the socket and we're the plug, and we have to go plug in, because what's happening is not only are our cells getting that excitement, electrical excitement from those electrons that are lining the earth, but we're also discharging and grounding that positive charge in the body. And as we talked about before, That's a good metric for inflammation in the body. The more positive charge, the more inflamed. The more negative charge, the less inflamed. And so this is just a great way to kind of think about that. And what's happening really as we speak right now, there are thousands and thousands of lightning strikes hitting the earth, discharging that electrical charge to maintain what I keep referring to as that lining or sea of electrons that line the surface of the earth. The surface of the earth has a net negative charge. So when we come in contact with it, not only do we pick that up, not only does that excite our cells and electrical conduction in the body, but also we can discharge that inflammatory positive charge, just like all of the sockets in a house are grounded because of that, to discharge and ground that excess charge and electrical charge. So it's once you start thinking about it, it becomes really sort of like common sense. Like, oh yeah, of course we run on electrical charge. We go into a hospital and we get EKGs to measure the electrical charge of our heart, or EEGs to measure the electrical conduction in our brain. This is not something new and crazy and unheard of. It's something that we haven't really brought to the forefront of health. And that's what's exciting about quantum biology, is it's starting to remind people that this is really primary in our lives. And this should be something that we hold as a priority for our health.
Yeah, I like the analogy of the plug and the electrical outlet. And then I was just thinking, I actually bought all these green wave plugins to plug into the electric to lower that electrical charge as well throughout my house. And we had an episode about dirty electricity and EMFs and trying to protect yourself from all that, right? I guess, again, people might be thinking, well, it's kind of hard to measure. And so they kind of more focus on things that are easily measurable, but there's certainly so many intangibles, so many things that we can't see. Is there a way to measure this at all? I mean, I think I have seen studies about when people do grounding and increase in blood flow and things like that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There are so many studies and so much research about this. Actually, there's really a wealth of information out there, and there's many ways to study it. So some people are doing it with thermography and looking at, just like you said, blood circulation and how it increases blood circulation throughout the body. Some people are just looking at like blood parameters and looking at inflammatory chemicals in the body, or what we call cytokines. They are sort of the little chemical messengers between cells. And they're measuring these, and they're finding that absolutely there's a decrease in inflammation. It seems to be helping balance the immune system as well. I mean, two enormous players in our health. And James Oshman has just done incredible research on earthing and grounding and the impacts of that. Of course, he's not the only one, sort of the pioneer though. And for anyone interested, you can just plug in on an internet search tool, earthing, grounding research. And I think it's earthing.org has them all laid out. And there are so many. And they're looking at different conditions. They're looking at overall blood parameters. But overarching idea is that it's decreasing inflammation. It's helping blood circulation. It's improving the immune balance and response in the body. It's helping with sleep. It helps with mood. So it's such an incredible tool to have, because most of us have access to the outdoors and coming in contact with it for free.
Right. Absolutely. I love that. What are some other things that can help reduce inflammation or kind of get you a more favorable electrical charge? What are some of the other things? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of my favorite relationships is, like we mentioned, the rising and setting of the sun. So when that sun rises in the morning at sunrise, it is delivering a spectrum of light that is very nourishing to our body. It's very nourishing, in particular, to our mitochondria, rich in red and infrared light, which help those mitochondria make ATP more efficiently. We've already talked about how we want that ATP production in the mitochondria. Dips in that can lead to issues. And so that light at sunlight is very nourishing to our mitochondria, and it helps prepare us for what happens a couple hours later. A couple hours later, we start to see a rise in ultraviolet A light and blue light. And this light signals to our body so many different things. It triggers the release of dopamine that feel focused, motivated. It triggers the release of serotonin. It helps an entire hormonal cascade happen in the body, dumping of cortisol, which can be, you know, really very essential for our hormonal cascades. So just getting AM light, getting light in the morning sets us up for hormonal balance. It sets us up for our immune system. Our immune system is also circadian driven. Actually, if we look at it, just a few years ago, the Nobel Prize was awarded to 3 scientists who discovered what we call chronobiology, or how our body is tied to the rhythm of the sun. And what they found is that almost every cell in the body has circadian genes or circadian clocks. So as sun comes through our eyes and hits our retina, it sends not only optical images to our brain through the optic nerve, but it also sends these light signals to our suprachiasmatic nucleus in the brain. And that's just our master clock. So as that morning light travels through our eyes, it hits the master clock in the brain, and then that master clock informs all the other cells in the body of what time it is. And if we are aligned with the rhythm of the sun, then our biology works better. Because like I said, almost every cell has that circadian machinery, those circadian genes, that circadian clock, which means that our metabolism is circadian driven. Our immune system is circadian driven. Our hormonal state is circadian driven. Our mood is circadian driven. Our cardiovascular, digestive, respiratory state. I mean, I could go on and on, right? It's all circadian driven. So this relationship we have with the sun is so important to get out, get that morning light, get light throughout the day. Of course, we're talking about safe sun exposure because there's sun damage and we don't want that. But getting that natural light, modern life has really made us deficient in natural light because we're inundated with artificial light almost all day long, right? So getting out for a chunk of time, 5, 10, 15 minutes in the morning, same thing in the afternoon. I mean, it doesn't have to be long. Of course, being outdoors, the longer we can, the better. But it doesn't have to be long to initiate these biological cascades that I mentioned. And then the flip side of that is honoring when the sun goes down. Again, we get that red and infrared light that helps support our mitochondria at sunset. But when it's dark, our cells are also looking for that signal. Melatonin is released from the pineal gland, which helps us rest. It helps us repair. It helps us get rid of any damaged and dysfunctional cells in the body. And melatonin, we think of it as just that, but it's affecting hundreds of different enzymes in the body. It is so much more than just our sleep hormone, which is really, really important, right? But it's so much more than that. And that immune function that I mentioned that's triggered by sun in the morning, it has to be built up in the darkness, right? So this sort of yin yang, really honoring that sun light hours, right? And also honoring the darkness. And what does that mean? That means lowering some of these LED lights that are really high in that blue light spectrum. And it's just a really small spectrum. It's not the full blue light, it's a small sliver. And so what we do here, I'm in the Pacific Northwest and it gets dark in the winter at like 4:30. So we don't spend the whole evening in darkness. We move to lights like this salt lamp behind me that are more like the glow of a fire, right? And those don't inhibit that conversion of melatonin. They don't block the circadian rhythm. Whereas some of the blue lights and the LED lights absolutely do block those biological functions.
Yeah, that's really great. I like a lot of what you said there. And let me see. There's a lot to unpack. I want to go back a couple of things you said. So first of all, a great morning routine, kind of 2-for-1. You can go out, put your feet in the ground, and get some morning sunlight first thing in the morning, and you're getting a great 2-for-1 there. Waking up kind of with the sun, right, around the same time as the sun rising, and then keeping, again, I wear blue light blocking glasses at night. I also try to avoid LED lights. And I can feel it now. Now that I'm used to wearing the blue light blocking glasses, I'm very sensitive to it when lights are very bright. But that's even better. So you mentioned a couple things. Maybe you can mention the light behind you. What kind of a light is that? Where can people maybe buy it from? Or if you have links to it on your website, feel free to mention your site. And then you also mentioned about grounding, that there are, because I thought I've heard of different kind of sandals or shoes that can still be conducive, but I never kind of knew if any of them were good or really worked. So I'm curious to hear if you have any recommendations there.
Yeah, absolutely. So the light behind me is just a Himalayan salt lamp. And the reason I got it is because it emits this orange light. You can get no blue light lights. Those are available places. Incandescent lights also are in that spectrum where they're not into that blue light spectrum and they don't inhibit all those wonderful things that we talked about. So all those lights are available out there. It's really the LED spectrum that just is so heavy in one sliver of that blue light, is so detrimental to our circadian rhythm and the mitochondria and the retina as well. And the grounding, grounding shoes are out there. Absolutely. There's several different brands out there. And what they do is they don't act as resistance, right? So if I had a wire and I wanted to light up my light bulb and I spliced it and put rubber in between the wires, that would just totally negate that flow of electrons and that electrical field that was being created, right? And so that's what grounding shoes work against, right? They usually have either conductive material in the soles. So Baha'i shoes, they're BAHE. They have conductive materials and they're like running shoes. So you can exercise and do, your activities outside and have that conduction. There's earth runners that are sandals that you can wear, or Rizal, it's RHIZAL. They kind of have these beautiful leather shoes, and both of those have copper in the bottom of the sole. So there's just a direct metal conduction there, right? And you're welcome to go to my site. I have discount codes at drcatherineclinton.com for those earthing shoes, but it's really about decreasing that insulating that happens with rubber shoes. And if you look at the graphs, it's so interesting. Like, we introduced rubber shoes, we introduced LED lights, and this electrical grid and artificial light at night around the same time. And that really mirrors the increase in chronic disease that we're seeing in modern life. And so, it's just something to really be mindful about, that it's this inflammatory response that we're getting from this artificial light, from this lack of nature exposure. And there's so much that nature has besides that electrical charge, right? There's, like you mentioned, forest bathing, where you go out, and there's been tons of research showing that increases so many different immune cells that are important for our body, important for cancer prevention. I mean, it's really the severing of these relationships we've evolved with over millennia, and just sort of slowly walking back into relationship with the rising and setting of the sun, relationship with the earth outside. It's such a beautiful thing to find comfort and health in these free and constant things, right? These relationships are always there, and there's some real beauty and ease to that.
Yeah, I love that. And I can't wait to buy a Himalayan salt lamp. That thing looks cool, and had not thought of that before. I didn't realize that was I don't know what I thought it was for. I didn't realize it was actually for having a light that's not a blue light. That's really cool. So I'll be getting
Yeah,
one
I
of those.
mean,
Mm-hmm.
oh, sorry.
No, yeah, go ahead.
I think that some people, there's talk about them emitting negative ions and doing all this stuff. I haven't seen a lot of great research about that, but I
Hmm.
can see quite clearly with my eyes that it is a yellow glow. And that's why we use them, because the light bulbs that they use are incandescent. And they just create this orange glow. Both my kids have no blue light reading lamps. And so we'll use those if they want to read, if they want to do an art project. And of course, blue light blocking glasses are good for those times when you can't avoid the blue light from technology or screens, because we all live in 2024. So sometimes that's unavoidable. And those can be really, really helpful as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I bought something a while back and put it as the lamp in all my daughter's bedrooms as well. It was like a baby bedtime low blue light, like incandescent bulb. So
Yeah.
that was a good one too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know you talk about other things like, for example, water, something people are drinking every day, putting in their body, right? Maybe we could talk about, water and food and the charges there, or things people can do there to get a more positive charge. Or
Yeah.
wait, did I say that wrong? Do we want to get more of a negative charge to reduce the positive charge, right?
Yeah, yeah, you got it. Perfect. Perfect. Yeah, that's a great subject. Water is so fascinating. And to be honest with you, we could have spent the whole time talking about water, right? But some simple things that I like to remind people about is that, like grade school, primary school, we learned about osmosis, right? That water follows those minerals. So our tap water is pretty polluted. So my primary focus when it comes to water is making sure we filter that water and get those pollutants out, making sure there's some mineral content so that it actually gets intercellularly, we hydrate, right? It doesn't just go through us. And then I like to talk a little bit about what's happening with hydration. And you mentioned food. Fruits and vegetables are a wonderful way to hydrate, right? They have a really high level of water, and the water within them is similar to the water within us. So Gerald Pollack, he's a professor out of the University of Washington. He runs a laboratory and has for decades out of the University of Washington. And he looks at what he calls the fourth phase of water. Some people call it cell-bound water, interfacial water. And what he was doing is he was looking at Nafion, and a synthetic substance that's not hydrophobic. It's hydrophilic. It allows water to come up right to its surface. It doesn't repel it away. And what he saw was that water creates a different structure. It takes on a different structure. It's more gel-like, it's more viscous, and it is much different than the bulk water in the body. And he found that it is negative in charge, right? He's stuck an electrode in that structured water that forms against this naphion. And he found that it was electrically charged. It was negatively charged. And then he turned his research to biological surfaces like a cell membrane, like collagen, right? And he found that that phenomenon happens there too. This cell-bound water starts to form and it creates a negative charge. And what's interesting is it kicks out a proton as it forms. One sheet of this structured water forms against our cell membranes, against our fascia, and it kicks out a positively charged proton, creating what researchers are calling a proton zone or a proton wire. And it's absolutely astonishing. We've got this negatively charged structured water against our cell surface and this positively charged proton zone. And Professor Pollack did research which has been replicated around the globe, put an electrode in the negatively charged and an electrode, in that proton-rich zone, and that separation of charge, just like a separation of charge in a 9-volt battery, was enough to light a light bulb in the lab, an LED light bulb in the lab. And it's being theorized that this is another energy source of the body. So these things that we talked about, earthing, sunlight, we could throw movement in there because he found that it was infrared energy, and we create infrared energy when we move. The sun is the biggest source of infrared energy in our solar system, and that infrared energy is helping to build this structured water battery, I call it, in the body. So when we're talking about water, we're talking about getting good, clean, mineral-rich water in the body so it can go intercellularly and create this water battery that's being associated with better health.
Yeah. And well, first, I'm sure many people are wondering, okay, where do I get this special water from? Can I get that? I know you did mention also, I'm curious actually your thoughts. What do you recommend for the average person in terms of water, right? I think if many people have the reverse osmosis system, under the sink in their house, the key thing you mentioned there was that you want to have mineral water with minerals, right? So if you're going to do reverse osmosis, it's my understanding you want to have a remineralizer as the kind of last step there, right?
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's to allow it to conduct, right? Allow it to fully hydrate ourselves and be able to conduct energy. Both of those things are really important to have that water get into us and have it be able to hold a charge. And so you're absolutely right. Adding those minerals back are going to be really important.
Yep. And what about, I mean, a lot of people, obviously, there's a lot of bottled water and the plastics in the bottled water. In theory, right, spring water is great with all the natural minerals, but then when you put it in a plastic bottle, right, that's not really ideal either, right? So, if you can find spring water in a glass bottle, that's probably, you tell me, you think that's probably the best bet?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There's an app out there called Find a Spring, just like it sounds, right? findaspring.com. And you can go on there and see if there are natural springs in your area. You look them up, they tell you the pollution level, all this different information about the spring, and you can actually go and collect, you can get those big glass jugs and collect spring water as well. So having that spring water in a glass bottle is a beautiful way to hydrate. Absolutely.
Amazing. Amazing. Any other, what's something that maybe people aren't thinking about or people aren't realizing that you're seeing with the average person, maybe in your coaching programs? Aside, we mentioned a lot of the big ones right now, but what's maybe some other things that people don't even realize could be hurting their health?
Oh, wow. There's a lot of those. I'm so glad that you did an episode on dirty
Mhm.
electricity, Wi-Fi. I think a lot of people don't realize that. I think a lot of people set up their bedrooms so that they have that charging port and their phone right there, just creating a huge source of um, interference in the body's electrical conduction. Again, Professor Pollack did research showing that Wi-Fi actually decreases that structured water as well, right? So we've got a few different mechanisms there that are acting against us with some of this stuff. And this can there are easy ways around it, right? So when we're talking about sleep, I think a lot of us don't realize that our electrical environment impacts us, our light environment impacts us, and our noise environment impacts us, right? We're living in a busy city. The noise is loud. The street lamp is coming through, and we're charging our phone by our head, right? And so these things are just easy switches. Blackout curtains, making sure that that room is really dark and it's simulating a nighttime, right? There's lots of research out there showing that a little bit of light at night decreases the efficiency and the depth of sleep that we get and the repair that's needed there, right? So that's something that's pretty easy to do. Trying to decrease noise as well. I've talked with people about putting rugs and tapestries as decoration on the wall to decrease something that they can't get away from, like a constant generator making noise or something like that, so that our body has that darkness, has that silence, has that coolness that it needs in the evening as well. So making sure that our bedroom is cool, it's dark, it's as silent as we can get it, and that we're not having a ton of electrical smog, right? So to speak, pollution there. So that looks like keeping the phone in the other room. I unplug my router. Some people even have electrical, when you go downstairs to your fuse box, you can turn off that conduction to a certain room. My bedroom's hooked up to the refrigerator, so I can't do that. Or otherwise, our food will get all crazy.
Yeah.
But, there's so many different ways around this, and unplugging the router at night is a simple way to help decrease that exposure at no cost.
I completely agree. I completely agree. I know a lot of people who have sort of like kill switches that will, turn
Yeah.
off all the electric, in the upstairs or in a certain part of the house or whatever. I think that's
Yeah.
great. Absolutely unplugging your router, especially if it's in the room where you sleep. Oof, really, really important to unplug that Wi-Fi router at night. Not sleeping with your phone next to your head. Putting your phone, I always keep my phone on airplane mode every night. And then even for the first hour or two of the morning, keep it on airplane mode. It's really, really important. So it's, a lot of people, even your phone, right? I know for a while, even still to this day, I try to limit how much my phone is actually touching my body, right? I had a measurement device and you could see the difference literally, even if the phone is just a couple feet away from your body versus if it's touching your body, the charge is tremendously different. And so, I sometimes cringe when my daughters are just holding their phones, for so many hours, it's so difficult to watch and deal with. But you can't win every battle, but you just do your best. But
Yeah.
yeah, so these electrical charges that people don't realize, I think is so important. So I'm so happy that we got to talk about a lot of this here today. I know we just only scratched the surface. Please tell people, where can they learn more from you, follow you? I think you have some courses and things of that nature, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just Dr. Catherine Clinton everywhere. I didn't get creative with that. My website is drcatherineclinton.com. My YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, they're all drcatherineclinton.com. And I love sharing this information. So I have free resources. I do teach courses, but I share a lot of free information because I just want to get the word out.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, Dr. Catherine, thank you so much for your time today. I hope people really pay attention and listen and learn and implement some of the simple free things or very low cost things or mostly free that you mentioned today. And I encourage people to go follow you and learn more from you. And hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Oh, absolutely. I'd love that. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, can you please leave us a rating or review and subscribe? I've realized that while we have actually increased our downloads a lot, we're actually getting a lot of downloads, which I'm really happy about. We actually have very few ratings. And I realized that I've never asked people really to rate much. So I'm asking you now if you could please rate and review and subscribe. And if you enjoyed the episode, please forward it along to anyone that you think will get value out of this. Also, if you haven't checked out our line of products at buypeakperformance.com, you get 20% off your first order. That's www.buypeakperformance.com. We have some incredible products, including our organic high-altitude coffee. If you don't know this, coffee is one of the most heavily sprayed with pesticides out of any crop. So it's really important that you drink organic coffee. We've gone above and beyond to source what we believe is the highest quality and healthiest organic coffee in the world. We're also famous for our organic green superfood powder. You can get 20% off of that as well at buypeakperformance.com. We also have an organic vegan and paleo plant protein. See, most of the vegan proteins out there are using brown rice protein, which is really not a good source of protein, and it's also a grain. And if you're paleo, you know that grains tend to cause inflammation in some cases for some people. And so we wanted to make one that was paleo friendly and vegan and organic. We made an amazing amino acid profile, so it's really one of the best plant proteins for muscle building. So you can check out Peak Performance Organic Plant Protein. You can find that on our website. Of course, all our products are on Amazon as well. So thanks again. And again, please, if you enjoyed the episode, please forward it along to someone who you feel can get value out of it. And please leave us a rating, review, and subscribe. Thank you.